The European New Deal is just one part of the EU strategy to reach net zero emissions by 2050. But this means that the regional blocs trading partners that do not meet the new green standards may have their goods blacklisted. If African countries do not meet standards, the continent could lose 5 billion euros in trade. And cocoa farmers in Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana have already been affected by the EU's new policy direction. In response to signals of a policy change, Nestle removed 4,300 cocoa farmers from Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire as they were considered to be growing cocoa in designated land, thus contributing to deforestation. Joining me from Johannesburg, South Africa is Clive Ramathibela Smith, business and market analyst with Hectare Capital and Partners. Clive, welcome back to Business Edge. It's good to have you with me.
Feels good to be here. It feels good to be African, and I hope everybody's having a fantastic Friday.
We are. So let's look at this very quickly. The EU's new Green Deal. What aspects of this policy direction and sort of these regulations do we see that are directly or indirectly going to affect, or as we've said now with the Nestle and the chocolate situation, are affecting African farmers as it is?
It's just like it has been throughout the course of history with our commodities on the African continent. We have no control over what happens with the pricing. We have no control with policy. We have not been included in the discussions of ways that it doesn't matter what we want to, it's just making decisions and not including the continent from which those particular commodities are coming from. It's a really sad reality of that, shows that even though we are in the 21st century, it seems like we're still following policies of the old regime of oppression and very, very limited amount of access to the African market and the goods that we are transporting and exporting out of the continent. I think these regulations are rather too fanatical, and the reason is because they don't actually address where Africa is. Africa still has a very low carbon footprint in the rest of the world. So if Europe wants to go and do those things, because they've been doing it, they've been polluting our planet for a very long time. Now it becomes very, very convenient for them to change policy without actually consultation with African nations from which those commodities are coming from. My question to them is it possible that they could actually, without using colonial style takeovers, to actually include the African people, the African farmers in some of these decisions, so that at least we have a contribution towards what they want to do. They do it with South Africa, they do it with the DRC, they do it with Kenya, they do it everywhere where those commodities are being abstracted from, both agriculturally and in the mining sector or the resources sector. They don't include Africans' voices to say how they will affect the economy. So it's about time then, therefore, maybe the AU themselves get involved in some of these negotiations.
So it's really interesting you say that, because critics of some of this new policy direction have said that the EU is actually practicing protectionism under the guise of achieving net zero emissions. Now, in 2018, the EU issued a blanket ban on palm oil for use in biofuels, reducing the opportunities available for palm oil farmers on the continent, and then increasing demands for the substitutes like sunflower oil, which is grown by farmers in the EU. So when you look at this, it really puts Africa on the back foot. And you've talked about the AU getting involved in possible negotiation and all of that. But in the long run, do you think this is about really the environment, or it's about not wanting to come out and say we're working to protect our own exports and our own farmers to the detriment of another continent?
Very fair points you make, my sister. But I don't want to be the one that says we are being dumped by the EU. But obviously the signs are all there, and you just have to follow the trend that we've seen happen over the last 10 years. You're mentioning some very valuable things that happened in 2018 that do affect the African continent. I think it's about time that the Trade Africa, which is supposed to be something that all Africans should be involved in, that trading and free trading zone, utilizing it to the best of our effect and looking for other alternatives other than EU as places where we want to do business. The restrictions and the policy change and the shift, yes, it has to do with the planet, But there are countries on the African continent whose footprint are so little that there's nothing that will happen in the next 10 years that's going to significantly change it. And I'll give you an example. South Africa, for example, has got a lot of coal mines, and these coal mines are 300 years worth of mining. So now you want to get rid of these mines, you want to decrease it, but yet at the same time, we've got the highest unemployment rate in the world, for that matter. So you have to think strategically, you have to position it well, but you cannot certainly pressure other countries into doing things the way you want to do it because it suits you and it's more convenient for you. I think that the AU must get more involved, and we need to have better trading relationships. We must be able to communicate or even deliberate on what it is that needs to be happening to protect Africa's agricultural sector, to protect African commodity structure and the pricing that comes from this continent. So yes, we're not saying they're dumping us, but certainly the laws and policies that are being introduced right now seem to be really one-sided affair. And it seems like the people that are going to get shortchanged is the African continent.
So your answer to that really reminds me of what the African Development Bank President, Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, said at the recent annual meeting in Ghana. And he said Africa cannot be poor on the way to this energy transition that the West is pushing for, and that we demand a just energy transition. So when you look at that, and you look at situations like this long-distance food transportation policy, that it can't come by air in order to reduce carbon emissions, and which means African countries will then need to look for new modes of transportation for their produce. Are we prepared for where the EU is taking us? And possibly where the EU goes, may other continents or other countries and trading partners or regional blocs also follow?
Yeah, and very, very, very important point that you just raised there. I'll give you another example. We're talking about the fact that we want to have electric cars. I mean, where is Africa going to use electric cars in this day and age when we still have so much to develop and so much to work on just the infrastructure, the developmental objectives, and also making sure that we inculcate that into our own structural reforms that we still have to reach. So it's very simple to introduce policies that don't necessarily affect other people, and they're all singularly looking at how you improve yourself in the EU sector. But here's something that I want to share with you, my sister, that I think each and every African has to look into. Yes, we want to be part of the fourth industrial revolution. Yes, we want to advance. Yes, we want to. But the point of the matter is, even in the history economically of the EU areas, they used things to the final end until they had to change because they were shifting to. If you look at the third industrial revolution, for example, in IT and technology, that has led us to where we are right now. Africa is still 60% not having electricity. We still don't have enough internet to be able to introduce some of these things. So we don't want to move so quickly that our people get so left behind, and then we deal with adverse poverty.
All right, I think some technical issues with the connection there, and I was going to ask Clive a final question because we spoke to him earlier this week when we looked at South Africa taking the EU to the World Trade Organization, actually instituting a complaint at the WTO because the EU has started new regulations that would basically keep about 654 million rand worth of citrus out of the EU. Now, the EU says it's to stop the spread of something called the false codling moth, which is a pest that affects citrus and oranges and things like that. But these regulations kicked in at the time that this produce was already on the seas on the way to the EU. So we've had a conversation with Clive earlier this week to see if the WTO would have a fast-tracked conversation or dispute panel on this, and if there's any update. All of this is meant to, of course, happen, and we expect that produce to get to the EU's borders sometime next week. Will it be rejected? Will it be destroyed? Or can some form of compromise be reached? Clive, are you back with me?
I'm back with you, and I don't think we're going to see that compromise.
Wow. So that's my final question to you because of time. Is there any update on this South Africa EU WTO citrus situation since we spoke last?
Since last time, the submissions have been made. The recommendations we're expecting to hear either early next week, by Monday. We'll know if whether or not they will accept the current voyage that's going there right now. But like I said to you last time, my sister, I find it very highly unlikely that they will be able to accept it because the regulations have already been struck, they've been already implemented, and already Spain is preparing to deliver those amounts of citrus goods to the EU sector. So for me, I'm thinking we are not going to see them being accepted. I'd love to come back to you. I've got a nickname in South Africa. They call me Into Zabantu, which means I tell things in the future. So I'm saying I don't see how that will happen. But if I'm wrong, I'll come back and say I'm wrong. And they actually did come to a compromise. But I highly doubt it.
All right, Clive, we'll be watching very closely and we'll probably touch base with you in the coming week to see how that develops. I'll have to let you go now and hand over straight to Lekan. He's standing by. We do quickly want to touch base with what the investor situation and sentiment is looking like in South Africa. Let me give you over to Lekan.
Thank you so much, Tolu. Let's now look at the 4 developing stories in the business world that we are tracking as of now. We start by telling you that the most recent momentum UNISA Consumer Financial Vulnerability Index shows that South African customers and consumers' financial situation significantly worsened in the second quarter of 2022. This is due to substantial increases in fuel and food product costs, load shedding, increased interest rates, and low economic growth. Tourism share in Tanzania's gross domestic product is projected to reach as high as 19.5% in 2025 and 2026. Godwill Wanga, the CEO of Tanzania National Business Council, said that the fastest growing sector in the economy has been contributing 17.5% and 30% of forex earnings. Away from that, the Kenya Revenue Authority has opened investigations against food producer Kakuzi over allegations of paying less tax as a result of cross-border financial deals with its majority shareholder, Camellia PLC. The KAR is seeking to establish possible tax losses from transfer pricing, whereby companies conduct transactions between different parts of the same organization. And finally, the Energy Transition Plan of Ghana, which aims to transition the nation to a cleaner energy source, is heavily dependent on the country's first nuclear power facility. The ETP is a means to move away from fossil fuels and towards zero carbon or renewable energy in the world's energy sector. And that's it on today's edition of Business Edge. Do not forget that you can follow us on our social media platform at New Central TV. You can also head to our website at www.newcentral.africa and download our mobile app on App Store and Play Store. Do not forget that at the top of the hour, News Now will be coming your way on New Central Television. So stick around for that. My name is Lekan Obanjo. Have a beautiful day and, of course, a lovely weekend.